Peace, everyone. Welcome to the Moroccan Post School for Government International Law. Tonight we have a wonderful guest. You know, he's going to be part of the Moroccan Post School for Government International Law teaching staff. We have Brother Keng El Bey, right? And he'll be presenting the topic, due process and contract studies. We have our Moroccan Post School of Government International Law YouTube page, Moroccan Post Media YouTube page. Go to the Moroccan Post Media YouTube page. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Right. So this class is always will be uploaded. Tomorrow we have my books, Moors and Masonry Part 1, The Illuminati Illumination of the Mind, Masonic Compass Square, and the Connection of Measurement and Timekeeping, How Moon and Venus Rule, Etymology and Vocabulary, Etymology and Vocabulary Supplement 1, and coming your way soon, Moors and Masonry Part 2. Right, so we have so we'll be looking forward to you. Once again, Moroccan Post Media YouTube page, like, comment, and subscribe. I know they have the name Earl Johnson here, but I'm Abdullah Bey, y'all. And I don't know, somehow locked out of my YouTube. And this is another brother's YouTube, Zoom. So everybody, I'm Abdullah Bey. All right, so without further ado, we're gonna bring up, Keng El Bey, due process and contract studies.
Welcome everyone tonight. We're going to get into the fundamentals of due process of law so that we will be able to make critical decisions and we get rooted into the fundamentals so that we can be able to then understand how to deal in law. And this is the first premise of understanding due process of law. So I'm waiting on you, Maymoon.
Yes, so everyone, welcome everyone for joining us on the Moroccan Post School for Government International Law. This is going to be a wonderful class. King will be back on we'll do for another class, the second Wednesday in April. So he'll be back with us, and I know then we'll bring him back maybe a month or so later because he has some other commitments, so previous commitments, all right, that he had to address. So we'll have him for 2 consecutive classes. And I'm definitely looking forward to everyone. So welcome everyone to the Moroccan Post School for Government, Moroccan Post School for Government and International Law. All right, once again, go to Moroccan Post Media YouTube page, all right? And we uploaded our classes, the Moorish Treaty Protection and Consular Relations series. Well, we have 101 course and as well as the 201 course. We'll be bringing Shem Malachi back in a month. As I said, King will be back with us on the second Wednesday of April. All right, so we'll see Shem Malachi be back here in a month as to continue with the Moorish Protection and Consular Relations 201 course. All right, so just waiting. And once again, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All right, let me know when we're ready.
All right, I'm ready here, y'all. It says host disabled screen sharing. So when the screen sharing is up, I'll be able to go ahead and do those things.
All right. So we ready?
Yeah, try it now.
All right.
See if that.
Yeah, so this is looking forward to this class. Due process and contract laws studies, contract studies. All right.
So we ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yes, still.
So we have a due process.
It's not showing, Maymoon.
It's not.
No,
No,
it's not showing. Still. All right, there we go.
there we go.
All right.
So tonight we're going to talk about due process and contract studies in accordance with the US law so that we can understand how to properly assess what's going on. So we can understand our status, right? So we can understand the jurisdiction and our relationship with the United States while we in it. Until we get this provisional government and everything running and flowing, we must understand what's going on so that we can properly understand what to do when dealing in contracts. Okay, Maymoon, I'm waiting on you, my brother.
All right. It said it stopped my share, but I'm still sharing on my end.
No, it's not on this end.
All right, just a second, folks. Pulling it back up again. Let's try this one more time.
Once again, everybody, welcome to the Moroccan Post School for Government International Law. All right, so don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also share the classes.
With this class, you will learn the fundamental principles, some of the fundamentals with due process, because the justice system hinges this whole system on due process. Without due process, there will be no justice. So you must understand the elements of due process. Okay, due process of law. There's two critical areas in due process. That's the substantive due process. Hold on. You got to go back a little bit.
Yeah, I clicked back. I don't know why it's going ahead. We good.
Okay, so the first essence is you need to understand what is due process. So you got substantive due process, and this is the contract that creates the rights, right? So this is when we're talking about international law and domestic, we're looking at the contract, okay? And that is when we're talking about even our divine rights. When you talk about your divinity, where's the contract? So a lot of us may be Muslim. A lot of us may be Christian. So you will subscribe to that ideology. That is the contract. And when we're talking about constitutional law and international law, dealing in an international community, looking at these charters and these various treaties, these are the contracts that creates the law. And then you have to understand who you are in relationship to those contracts determine your rights. Then next is procedure. When we're dealing in the law and we're dealing in state and law and federal law, they set up procedures or rules of instruction to follow in order to be able to follow these rules. And everybody who on both sides, the plaintiff and the defendant, have to follow these rules or they be in procedural violations. And it would disqualify their claim because they're acting out the scope in which is prescribed by the rules that everybody must follow. Then we're looking at the contract. Let's look at the contract. Who are you identified within the contract? Who are you? Are you a subject? Are you a ambassador? These titles right? How you identify. So you're gonna have your name, which identifies you, and then your class. What is your class? Are you a subject, ambassador, international protected person? So that classification determines your rights and your status in relationship to the contract, which determines everything. So if you was an ambassador, you may have immunity from the jurisdiction, right? But if you're a subject, you may not be immune from the jurisdiction. And if you're a subject, they might say, hey, you can't bring particular claims. Where's your government to help you bring forth these claims? Because you're barred. This is a prohibition. So you got to understand your status in relationship to any agreement to determine your role in that society. So we're going to touch uniform consumer credit codes tonight in relationship to US law, because a lot of misconceptions about the UCC, but these are the UCCCs that a lot of people are not familiar with, that they have to understand the uniform commercial credit codes as it relates to consumer credits and the due process procedural prowess that's necessary for you to utilize these UCCCs. Okay, Maymoon, we can go on to the next slide.
I heard you, brother. I clicked it. It's just it ain't moved yet.
Slide.
Yeah.
So while he's getting it together, is there any questions that anyone wants to ask about due process?
So the Uniform Consumer Credit Codes,
Okay.
would that also be where the Uniform Commercial Code comes from, or how are they connected?
There are two different aspects of law, two totally different. You have the Uniform Law Commission that creates all your uniform codes. Remember, Congress said they're going to make all the laws uniform. So they must have uniformity. So that's how that works. So they're totally separate from each other. One is dealing with commercial transactions, and the other one is dealing with credit, consumer credit transactions. Totally two different aspects. So when you sign up for these instruments, is this the third slide?
This is keynotes before it actually gets
Okay.
into each topic that you're finna discuss.
Also, when we talk about contracts law, you need to understand certain elements. So when you sign up for these instruments, they are adhesion contracts that determine your status and duties to the United States.
Can't hear you, just keep breaking up, missing out, so I can't ask any questions. Missionary Street, Red Cloud, New Jersey Republic.
Okay, I could barely make you out, brother. What did you say that again?
Who asked the question? Go ahead, King. Continue.
Okay. In order to understand the contract, you must understand the terms and elements. This will help you see the contract on its face and will raise the level of scholarship to help you qualify and disqualify the contract. So you have to understand these components so you can understand what do the contract prohibit and what do the contract allow. So then you can determine if you can disqualify certain actions in the contract, and certain things may not be stated in the contract. So writing a contract is very specific in nature, so you can know the do's and don'ts. And if you leave out something in the contract, the court then must determine certain things to qualify the contract, to determine if this even is a qualified contract. Did you meet the criteria and elements to solidify if this is a contract? So let's continue, Maymoon.
Right.
You're trying to get to the next slide? All right.
Types of due process, there's substantive and procedural. So, like I said before, substantive is the rights created by contract. So even when you're born, right, if your family is Muslim, right, and you were born into a Muslim family, that's a contract. Because the culture, right, is embedded in the nationality. So if I say that I'm a Moor and I'm Muslim, right, that the culture would be automatically embedded in the contract because my parents are Muslim. I would inherit that right to be a Muslim until I get old enough to contract and decide for myself. I might say, okay, I want to expatriate or excommunicate from, not so much expatriate, I want to excommunicate, I want to be a Christian now. So I might not want to be a Muslim. I'm still a Moor by consanguinity, but I'm excommunicating from that law and coming into another law. That's a part of my contract substantive, right? And when you're dealing in treaties, the treaty is the contract substantively that creates the rights. And then we got to look at the procedural side, is the rules of engagement under international law in which we're going to respect to come up to resolve conflicts. So, like for example, would it be your procedural due process would be the rules of evidence? Those are procedural rules of civil procedure. That would be your procedural due process. The rules of criminal procedure, that would be a part of your procedural due process. The traffic rules, that would be a part of your procedural due process, right? The rules of superintendent, that would be a part of procedural due process. On the federal side, you have the federal procedures, right? Civil procedures. Then you will have the criminal procedures of federal. Then you will have CFRs. Those are procedural guidelines. Those are due process procedures, right? And then you have your statutes, right? Some of your statutes may even give instructions, right? And some of your statutes, as it applies to you, determines your status in connection with that contract. So these are all very prudent and very critical things. So if you wanted to challenge jurisdiction, you would know what the basis of how you're going to challenge it. And your status is going to determine if you're supposed to get treated in accordance to that agreement that you signed. And a lot of us are not reading these contracts. Most of us are signing these contracts, don't know they're adhesion contracts, and then there are being inclusions in there. So let's go on to substantive due process, okay? So whether the government is deprived of deprivation of a person's life, liberty, or property is justified by its sufficient purpose. So now we're going to look at the keys, the first keys to understanding substantive due process is pointing out the contract that created the law. Okay. Secondly, the application of law must be applied when dealing with the contract because status will be determined on the basis of it. Okay. We got to understand this. So when dealing with the contract, status must be determined because the status determines one's rights, which one applies for. For example, a driver's license. Okay. Application of law is the process of applying legal principles and rules to a particular set of facts and circumstances. So when we talk about circumstances, when they're talking about circumstantial evidence, they just saying these are the facts. These are the other facts associated with the case. So anytime you're dealing with something, they're looking at what they call facts, findings, and circumstances. So always in a court case, you come into a conclusion of facts and a conclusion of law, and they're separate. Okay. So let's talk about standing. Standing is a state or condition, right? And Ronald's, let me see, that's kind of, could you make it a little smaller, Maymoon? Because some of it's blocked. Well, I could read it. Status is the standing, the state or condition in the case of Ronald's versus Pennsylvania Oil Company in California, the rights and duties and capacity and incapacity which determines a person to give a given class, right? A legal personal relationship, not temporary in its nature nor terminable at a mere will of the parties, which a third person in the state are concerned, right? And here's the case laws. And then we're going to break it down. It's also mean in a state because it signifies the condition or circumstances in which one stands with regard to his property. In the yearbooks, it was used in this sense. So when we talk about, this is the thing that I try to tell everyone. When you're dealing with law, internationally, domestically, local law, look at everything as property. Look at everything as a property right. Because your status is a property. And I'm gonna give you an example. If you are a general in the military, right? That status is owned by that institution. And when you leave that institution, you don't take that status with you. Another example, if you say that I'm a US citizen, that status is owned by that institution. And when you leave that institution, you don't take the US status with you. You take on another status in relationship of joining another nation. And that's going to determine your rights because it's all property rights. And within that nation, it help you define your role and purpose and your duties and obligations. You got to go back one. I haven't finished with that, Maymoon. I don't know. So let's talk about capacity. Capacity, a word having many meanings, depending on the relationship to the subject matter. Campbell versus Cornish, right? It may mean ability, actual production of an oil well. This is another case, Hillis versus Vard. And intelligent perception and understanding of the disposition made of property. Everything is property. So when we talk about your status, right, and then we talk about your capacity, I want you to know that your status determines the capacity in which you can operate. So certain things based upon your status allow you to do certain things, right? If you're the president of a company, you might have a larger capacity to do things versus if you're an employee. Or if you're the owner has more responsibilities and duties than an employee. So based upon your status determines your rights and responsibilities and duties. So also the attribute of a person's which enables them to perform civil or juristic acts. So we got to talk about juristic acts in relationship to a lot of people call they call it their straw man, but it's a juristic person. It takes on a personality. What happens when you get these when you take on these instruments, when 9/10 of the law is possession? So a lot of people are like, man, this is my straw man. But what they do is they create a legal person, a juristic person. Why? Because now he has obligations and duties. And when you take possession of those instruments, you have obligations and duties because you took possession of it. You say, okay, I want to take the contract. Now give me those things. Give me the social security card. Give me the driver's license. Give me the birth certificate. Give me those instruments. And when you take those instruments under contract, you have obligations and duties. And in relationship to that, there are a lot of adhesions to those contracts in which you are obligated to perform. Just because you didn't read it doesn't mean that those duties and obligations are not there. Because you're ignorant to it, you took possession of it. And you didn't know how to dispel the situation. Now, by you having possession, now they can drag you into court and say, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, and you didn't do this. And now you are liable because you can't interfere with the public debt because they got obligations to other nations. So public capacity of municipal property is such capacity as all the people of the state are likely interested in. So you got to understand how this jurisdiction works. So you must understand substantive due process to procedural due process to understand when you take on these properties, right? You take possession of these instruments that you have obligations and duties, and you must know what those obligations and duties, or you shouldn't take possession of. Don't take them. Because a lot of Moors are taking property, and what I like to tell people, the law follows the property. Give you a prime example. If Abdullah give me his car, it don't change the fact that it's his car. I got to, if he say, King, have my car back here at 9 o'clock, I don't get to say, well, Abdullah, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I'm gonna drive the car until 12 o'clock. Or if he give me his computer and he say, I need it back in 2 days. After he gave me those instructions and I take possession of that, I have to follow the instruction because the property is his. Just like when you take possession of these instruments, because the United States is an instrumentality, it's a corporation. Now, when you take on these instruments, you don't get to tell them with how you gonna run the show. It's theirs. And the law follows their property. Just by you having possession of them, they got jurisdiction. On to the next slide.
Are there any questions? Hold on, King. Are there any questions about what King talked about for the past 10 minutes?
Yeah, I have a question. This
Yes.
Rose. Yeah, so I'm trying to understand, because I understand I understand that the US is this fictional corporation, right? A fiction of the mind, right? And then they created this whole world, this whole jurisdiction, and then they brought real living people into their jurisdiction unknowingly, right? However, like the way they did it was through feudal practices, right? So like it's one thing like you take, Abdullah's property, his vehicle, right? But originally you stole the vehicle, then you started driving the vehicle, then you gave the vehicle rights, then you gave it back to Abdullah, and then you said to Abdullah, it's your car, but it's with conditions, right? And those conditions, I guess, would be like a particular status, but you really didn't hand over the car. So I'm just trying to understand, like, because like, and it also goes into like how to survive within their jurisdiction. Like, so we need the license to go to work, to feed ourselves, right? To live and to function. So how would we do it otherwise?
How will we, be outside of that jurisdiction?
Like, how would we be outside of their jurisdiction, for instance, right? Just in modern times.
Well,
would
okay. So that's what we're trying to establish, the provisional government, building a community, right? So we're trying to, with Abdullah, Shem, and all of us on this panel tonight, we're learning about certain fundamentals so that we can build this community. So that now under international law, we can create a provisional government that will protect everyone's rights, because we're not there yet. So a lot of us is acting in an individual capacity. And what happens when we practice and we adopted this ideal, this ideology of individualism, what they did was they divided and conquered. As long as we act in that capacity, they're going to subdue us because they're working uniformly. That's why their codes are in uniformity. They all in agreement. They're all working in unison. They're acting as one organ with many different pieces, but they're working and for one purpose. Just like your body, you got 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but all your body parts work for the well-being of you. Even though there are individual components of your body, right? But you're still working for one unit. So us trying to do this, let me sum this up as it relates to the question at hand. How do we move? We have to learn this information so that we can better have a grip onto moving, then to be able to work together as a group and petition, right? Come together and work, because really there is no petition that you have to go to get your sovereignty. There's nothing. Only thing that International Court of Justice, only thing they're going to do is give you opinions and tell you what you need to do and how they look at everything. But if we don't come together and start doing this, working as a group with on this platform, what Shem and Abdullah is suggesting, then what's going to happen is we're going to stay in this condition. And this is the first tier that's necessary to build these provisional governments so that we can all move as one body and the government can protect your rights. Because that's how they do it in the international arena. They don't deal with individuals. They don't look at you and say, oh, we're gonna deal with this one person, and then this one person deal with a whole country of millions of people. They gotta come to you.
Right. So now I don't know if I'm going further out, but like within this provisional government, are they going to have check and balances like they do within the U.S.
Of
and
course.
the okay for
Of
you know
course. If you understand the Quran, you understand how Muhammad, all of these things under how Moors what Moors did, they already showed you that through ancient principles. All we got to do is look toward the past. Look at what our forefathers and foremothers already done, and just replicate and mimic what was already been done and established, where they had great success. And then stay away from the things that what caused their demise. We look into the past so that we can also measure the future. By taking in those strong principles that allow them to thrive and take out those that cause their demise. And improve on what we need to improve on. That's it. Simple.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Maymoon. So this is very important. I want to show you this, family. This is the application for the driver's license, right? But a lot of you don't know, when you sign up for the driver's license, at the bottom down here, where my arrow at, okay, there, and it comes over here, you're signing up for the selective service. A lot of you don't know how.
Let me know if you need me to read that, brother. Sorry.
So give me 1 second and you can read it, right? A lot of you don't know, when you sign these documents, they have other provisions, adhesions to them, that now attach you to other things as it relates to the jurisdiction. So a lot of us just not reading our contracts. We're not going over them. And here's the funny part, right? This is the very funny part when we looking at these contracts. I want y'all to remember this. So if you're coming in as a business, especially using the UCCs, you are supposed to know, right, that when you take on that contract, you are obligated, it's binding, because try to go to court and say you operating as a business. They're going to say you can't come in the courtroom without your attorney. They're going to bar you from that. So you are presumed as a business that to understand the law, and that you have a right to an attorney to review the law. But if you sign them as a business, you automatically bound to the contract. But if you come in as a layman, as a consumer, I want you to understand the distinct difference. This is why we're talking about the UCCCs, the Uniform Consumer Credit Codes. If you come in as a consumer and you get into a contract and they don't give you notice that you are required, that you all have a right to have an attorney review that, you can disqualify the whole contract just off of that. This is why the United States created you a legal person to come into the jurisdiction. But you don't have to come in that capacity as a juristic person. You don't have to. But if you come in and you come in under a particular status, right, like a consumer is not bound to the same conditions as a corporation or any form of corporation. Because under the IRS codes, the individual is considered a sole proprietor. So that means you're coming in as some kind of business entity. And when you sign these contracts, you're automatically bound to them. But if you say, hey, I'm coming under a different capacity, dealing with another type of rights or consumer rights or religious rights, then they have to give you notice you have a right to an attorney to review this. And if they don't, then that's a violation of due process. Because the first, and always in due process, the first step is you must be given notice. You must be well informed. So, Maymoon, read the United States Selective Service, a part of the driver's license contract. Could you read that?
The bottom right part that people can barely see that part. So you have a United States Selective Service. Any male, I mean, that says any. Any male United States citizen or immigrant who is at least 18 years of age, but less than 26 years of age, submitting this application consents to registration with the United States Selective Service system. You must be registered to qualify for federal student aid, to include Pell Grant, job training, federal employment, and citizenship if an immigrant. In Texas, you must be registered to qualify for state college, student aid, or state employment. If convicted, failure to register with the Selective Service is a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison and or $250,000 fine. If not registered by age 26, you can no longer register and could permanently lose those benefits associated with the registration. For alternative options, for applicants who object to conventional military service for religious or other consensuous reasons, information is available at the website that's below that they specified.
Now, let me ask you this. How many of y'all got a driver's license and signed it and didn't check off those other options? And perform those other options instead of you being in selected service, because what I showed Maymoon, right? And 50% in all states, if you are considered a resident, you are a part of the militia. Give me 1 second, family. Okay, family, I'm back. Hello. So a lot of us don't know these adhesions. So a lot of us, when we take on a birth certificate, social security card, we're not reading. We don't know all the things associated. So then we try to go in and try to do these Morris processes, and it don't stand a chance because you attach yourself to these adhesion contracts. Signed up for the selected services and signed up for a social security card. And one of the elements that I provided to Maymoon was when you sign up for a social security card, it says you who has a social security card owes a debt to the United States. It tells you what to do. So a lot of these contracts, you are taking on these adhesions, and then you go in there and you try to challenge the jurisdiction, and they looking at you like you crazy. Because you attach yourself to these adhesion contracts through this one contract. And you didn't read the contract closely and carefully, and you didn't ask them, could you take it home to have it reviewed by an attorney? and they didn't give you notice that, hey, what capacity that you're operating in, you can then have an attorney review this. A lot of us just take these contracts home with us, and we don't even take them home with us. We just sign these contracts right there and there, and then don't even understand all the rights and duties and responsibilities associated with that contract. You just signed up for the military, do a driver's license, and didn't even know it, that you are part of the militia. Now, this is where the police come in. Now the police have the right, because now they're part of the military under the unorganized militia that you're supposed to follow, and the police can stop. And then you got Morrison saying, no, I was under duress, stress, and coercion. And what did I show you, Maymoon, under military coercion? Answer that for the people.
Well, like we discussed last time, what it showed on the military coercion, that they have a right to do as they please, since, like you stated, in these contracts that we sign, and we sign it up as a private of the military. So they have a right to force coercion and do what, they please to do to you. So
if you look up military conversion, it's not in the slide. Coercion. Look up military coercion. So I hear a lot more, no, they can't do that. Yes, they can. You in the military, you just didn't even know it. This is why you can get drafted. And you thought you were just signing up for a driver's license and didn't even know that you were in the military. Under the unorganized militia. And you have a duty to obey the law. Well, I just did a U-turn, wasn't nobody around, so what? So what? You signed a contract that you were a part of this, and guess what? They can enforce it. With force. They tell you to get out the car, you got to get out. They tell you to get down on the ground, get down on the ground. You don't got a choice because you just signed up for the military through getting a driver's license. Okay, let's move on, Maymoon.
okay, just a second to make sure I didn't click it too many times and we get past all the slides. So just a second.
Islam,
I have a question. Go ahead, brother.
what about reservation of your rights?
Well, what do that mean by reservation? What rights are you reserving?
Inalienable rights. When you sign reserving your inalienable, reserving your inalienable rights.
You just waive them through contract. Contract make the law.
Just a second, we're not ready yet.
Hold on. To answer that question, go back, Maymoon. It tell you, right? For alternative options for applications for applicants who object to, what that say, a commercial, what that say?
For alternative options for applicants who object to conventional military service for religious or other consensuous reasons, information is available.
Did you go to those other options and check that off? Because if you didn't preserve your rights. You didn't reserve those rights.
Where is he reading on the form? Where is that box at?
That
Yeah,
it's the big, where is it big under the blue cloud? Says United States Selective Service. It's on the bottom of this contract, and he just blew it up. So it's blurry, but it's on the bottom of that contract, of a driver's license contract.
Okay, and I have another question. Does this same thing apply to DOT if you're getting a DOT, DOT, number so that you cannot operate.
It's a DOT number.
It's a DOT, like driving commercially on the streets without saying that you are an actual DMV vehicle.
I don't know what a DMT is.
DOT,
A DOT is.
no.
You have to look at the contract, family. The contract makes the law. And whatever the contract you fail to line item veto, or you don't follow the instructions, you don't preserve your rights. I don't know what's all in the application, but I'm pretty sure a lot of things is in the application that we're just signing that we don't even know we just signed up for.
So I have a question. Now, can you go back and change the contract? If like now that I'm aware of this information, can I go back and say, hey, you know, I made a mistake?
Okay, most of these contracts, like driver's license and stuff like that, have an expiration date, right? What you can do is you can rescind the contract, just give them up and then go back if you need to go back in, or just don't apply for those contracts at all. So a lot of us is just signing up under these contracts and not looking at everything necessary. We don't understand what we're signing. And ignorance of the law is no excuse. And this is where they whooping us on contracts. I've been looking at, the more I look and see all the contracts that I sign, I say, man, I signed up for this, I signed up for that, I signed up. I was just on this, when I was looking up not too long ago, looking up the selective service, I went to this website and put my information in. Sure enough, I came up under the selective service. Okay. Procedural due process, definition. Procedural due process is how the courts proceed based upon the evidentiary standards and rules of practice. Everything has to be procedurally sound in order for the court to make a proper judgment. Example, traffic procedures versus criminal procedures when dealing with procedural processes within the courtroom. So when court make any decision based upon these rules, if you don't do everything according to these rules, you will be barred, what they will call time barred. You will be time barred from presenting your case because you don't get to hold up the court because you do not know how to properly litigate. You don't know these things. The court is not going to let you come back time and time again. They only going to give you one bite of the apple. You're not going to get several bites of the apple unless you can prove it was void ab initio on his face from the beginning and that the contract did meet constitutional muster.
Hey, King, go more into
You're
that.
on mute. You're on mute, brother.
I'm not on mute.
I put it on mute because Chief was calling.
King, go more into, spend some time on void ab initio, void on his face.
Okay, so when we look at contracts, you must determine the law, determine if is it illegal or not, right? If a contract is illegal, like for example, let's say you and your partner, y'all was dealing drugs and he said, man, I'm gonna I'm gonna contract with you for 500,000 for this much of drugs. That will be an illegal contract, so it will be void ab initio on its face. It's a prohibition against that. You can't operate in that fashion. So if a contract violates a law, then the contract in itself would be void on its face. So when you look at the Constitution, this is why all your contracts must meet what they call within the United States constitutional muster, or is in violation. It's a violation of the Constitution, and which is void in itself and cannot be enforced. So when you understand, this is why I try to tell people, if you're going to get into contract law, especially dealing with the United States, you must understand the Constitution and the degree of the Constitution to determine even if the validity of a statute or any contract, because you got to remember, statutes are nothing but mere provisions of contracts. They're nothing but extensions of contracts. That's all they are. When we looking at everything, we must put everything in a contract form, and we must remember that everything is just about contracts and property. And due process said they cannot take property without giving you due process. They can't strip you of any right, and all rights is considered property. It must meet constitutional muster or it's void ab initio, and it don't have any legal standing on its face. It's unenforceable. So you must understand what due process is to say, well, these people didn't afford me due process, so automatically it's void. And if you don't know what due process is, substantive and procedural due process, you're not going to know where you can make your arguments. Now you got to deal with the merits. It can turn into a he say, she say thing, and the only thing they got to do is prove 51% to your 49, and they won the case. All they got to do is tilt the scale just a little bit. That's it. They don't have to have this big presumption of law proving their case or proving the outline of their case. They just need to tip the scale just a little bit more favorable than you, make more sense than you, just a little by a small margin, and they can convince the judge and you lost. So everything has to be procedurally sound in order for the court to make a proper decision. So we're going to talk about the local rules of the court. Most of y'all don't even read the local rules. They still apply. You can read all the criminal procedures, the civil procedures. Y'all might even read the rules of evidence. But most of y'all won't read within your state laws. Like in my state, they have the rules of superintendent. Then they have the local rules of the court. Most people don't know the local rules. They get in the court and don't even know they can disqualify their case because they don't even know the local rules.
So where do you find the local rules?
Every court has the local rules. Whatever court you is, whatever municipal court, they have their own local rules. All you have to do is ask, go down to the clerk house, to the clerk of court, ask them their local, where can they find their local rules? If they got a website, or can they give you a printout of the local rules? Okay, next slide, Maymoon. So here's another contract that I want y'all to look at to understand. This is Ohio. Ohio Department, this is dealing with a person who's a non-citizen. Proof of residency. Ohio Department of Public Safety, Bureau of Motor Vehicles. Proof of residence. So when you're a resident, by law, you are a part of the militia. And how they're going to determine if you're a resident, that you're going to have a social security number. I mean, not a social security number. You're going to have a zip code, and you're going to have driver license or other credentials that show that you're a resident of that state. And by you being a resident of these states through these contracts, through these adhesion contracts that you sign, now they got proof of jurisdiction because you got a driver's license. You holding these instruments. That's proof. And they got a record, a public record of it. And then you get on there and tell me I'm gonna challenge the jurisdiction. They looking at you like, Tell us about your Moorish history. They're entertaining and laugh with you the whole time. Hey, tell us about what is a Moor? And they'll laugh, they'll be right there with you and they will laugh and do all of that stuff. Yep, minimum contacts. Minimum contacts. These are minimum contacts, as with the brother who put in the thing. These are minimum contacts. So when you create these minimum contacts, you're in the jurisdiction. This is what they use. It's called the substantial presence test. It's called the Supreme Court is going to use the substantial presence test to determine your minimum contacts within the jurisdiction and to pull you in the jurisdiction, because what they're using is contracts. And then they looking, okay, you ain't got a contract with us. Well, why do you have this particular property within your possession? Because that's our property. That's how, another way, MRAM jurisdiction, they pulling you in through a MRAM procedure based upon you holding these instruments. And then you want to come in and challenge jurisdiction, but you didn't know what you signed up for. And now you're saying, I want to use my Moorish treaties. You disqualified yourself from anything because these adhesion contracts, they got proof of contract, proof of claim. So in this contract, it says proof of Ohio residency, certified statement. This form must be completed when the applicant for Ohio driver's license or Ohio ID card cannot provide proof of Ohio street address through documents listed on the BMV acceptable documentation list.
You know,
Hey.
King, let me make this comment here. You have quite a few conscious Moors over the past 30 plus years, have come into this movement and been taught individual process, fend for yourself. They have not seen a political structure. So a lot of the comments you'll get will be coming from that perspective. We're working to change that. That's all they know. All they know is the individual. Fend for yourself. That's all they know. They've been taught that. They've seen other ones do it. They have not seen, they don't know the power of political structure. They don't know it. All they know is individual upon fend for yourself, do for yourself, individual process. They don't know the power of political unity. They don't know that principle. They don't see it. And that's so a lot of the questions will be coming from that.
What I want us to understand, you got to, family, we start reading these contracts. You got to start reading these contracts. If you're going to claim your inalienable rights, you better have you a contract. Because what I do with my community, with me and Chief Vandalay and my brother Karas, Everything is done through contract. We contract with each other. Why? Because contract makes the law. Contract, 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 contract. You're gonna hear me talk about contract. And if you don't know how to contract and contractually safeguard your rights, so we have to understand this. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. So don't get in bed and get into a contract and you don't know what you're doing and what you're signing up for. This is why government structure is so important. My brother Maymoon, okay. Contracts create the rights up under the contract that is created. The title of the contract doesn't determine the relationship of the two parties. The title doesn't always match the substance of the contract. One must analyze the contract to determine the status, to understand one's relationship in the contract. One looks at the jurisdiction to determine what is required to be in the contract, requisites that's needed to be followed, the rule-out process to qualify and disqualify the application of law. So that's a mouthful right there, right? So a lot of us Moors are trying to find our way to a jurisdiction and have treaty applications, right? We're trying to come on a treaty. So you got to identify yourself as a treaty party and look at the applications required to be identified as a treaty party. You can't how or have these instruments and then turn around and say, I'm a treaty party, because treaty parties don't have those instruments. They have instruments from their own government in relationship to the contract associated with a treaty.
Hey, King, let me make a comment with that, King.
Yeah.
For over 100 years, conscious Moors have been taught they're part and parcel of the United States. That's been for over 100 years. I taught that for 25 years. I taught that, for over 40 years, conscious Moors have been taught that we, the people of the United States, denote the Moors. That 35 Moors was at the United States Constitutional Convention. That the Moors are the founders of the United States. That that the United States Constitution is the Moorish Constitution. So what we're gonna do is get Maymoon to help me with this, is that we're gonna show an image where you have a European on one side, European male on one side, and the Star Spangled Banner behind them. The European and a Moor wearing either a turban or fez with the Moorish flag behind them. And then we're going to have them both pointing at the United States, a scroll where they're both pointing at the scroll, United States Constitution. All right, we've only shown where a Moor is doing that, but we need to show both. Where European, the Star Spangled Banner, and the Moor with the Moorish flag, and they're both pointing at the United States Constitution. All, my right to bear arms, United States Constitution, right to bear arms, right to petition, First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, Seventh Amendment, And so we could do that. Because you've seen scenes of that. This misconceptions, King, it is misconceptions. I was involved in it for 25 years. I know the misconceptions forward and backwards. I've taught it to thousands of people, 25 years. We're saying we're more. We're saying we're more. We'll have in our instrument, I'm a Moor, and that I am belonging to, and it was some entity, and then using the United States Constitution as if you're a United States citizen. It's confusing It's the misconceptions, man. It's the misconceptions. All right, so we're clearing up these misconceptions. This is why we're presenting with showing that the foundation of the United States authority is the Treaty of Peace and Treaty of Paris between Great Britain and the United States, definitive peace treaty between Great Britain and the United States in 1783. Moors have been support the enforce the Constitution, enforce the Constitution, enforce the Constitution, enforce the Constitution. You know, that this concept that in order to enforce the Moorish treaties, the Moorish treaty can only be enforced through the United States Constitution. All right, no problem. Show me that in the Moorish treaty. Show me what you just said in the Moorish treaty. But Moors are not on that level of thinking, conscious Moors, but we're raising their level of consciousness. So I greatly appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, brother, thank you. So everything is specified. This is why when we talk about contract, you got to be able to understand how to interpret the contract. You got to know what you're reading to make discernment, to understand your relationship to everything. Because I try to get everybody to understand. This is about a membership agreement. Who are you in relationship to these contracts? So when we talk about these Moorish treaties, some of these Moorish treaties are self-executing. What does that mean? Self-executing. I'm just gonna go into that. That means one party has already started executing the contract, making it binding on the other party. The contract now, they're using our treaties. They're still in use. They're riding around using our treaties and then telling us we don't have a right to claim those treaties. When they're using it for their own benefit, and they're supposed to be, and our foremothers and forefathers left those treaties for us. But this is the disqualification. You are holding to United States instruments. You got driver's license, you got birth certificates, you got social security cards. You got all of these things. You got all of these things, family, right? You got all of these things, and now you go into there, and now you holding these instruments, and then you go into them talking about the Constitution. They tell you even in the very Constitution, under Article 6, Section 2, that all obligations prior to this Constitution is still enforceable. It's still enforceable. So the treaty's going to stand on their own. They don't need the Constitution. But you cannot be holding their instruments and then calling yourself a Moor. That's not going to happen. And then there are other doors that we can come through to get identified as a treaty party. But we don't understand that. So we listen to a lot of Moors. Hey man, go get your birth certificate. Go get your social security card and all of that. When the treaty itself is a security agreement, the treaty can be enforced as a credit voucher. The treaty can stand on its own, prima facie evidence. If you understand the rules and enforce the rules, but you cannot hold on to these other instruments and then turn around and try to enforce the Constitution and claim yourself as being a Moor. It does not work. It's inapplicable. It's inapplicable. It's inapplicable. You're doing a contradiction in law. You can't serve two masters. Even in the Bible, it knows that. There's a conflict of jurisdiction. Okay, Maymoon, you can go on to the next slide. So we're gonna talk about, here's an example of a sample mortgage agreement, right? So a mortgage agreement, this agreement is made and entered to this date by the lender and the borrower. Whereas the borrower desires to obtain a loan from the lender in the amount of blank for the purpose of purchasing the property located here pursuant to the terms of the purchase agreement attached hereto as Exhibit D. Whereas the lender is willing to provide the loan to the borrower subject to the terms and conditions set forth in this agreement. Now I want you to read that. It says, whereas the lender is willing to provide the loan to the borrower, subject, now the borrower has subjected himself to the terms and conditions. So now he's a subject to the terms and conditions set forth in this agreement. He said, I'm going to subject myself as a borrower to these terms and conditions. Now, therefore, in consideration of the mutual promise and covenant set forth herein, the parties agree as follows. The loan agreement, borrower agrees to repay the loan in accordance with the terms set forth in the loan agreement attached hereto as Exhibit A. Covenant agreement, borrower agrees to comply with the covenant set forth in the covenant agreement attached hereto as Exhibit B. Purchase agreement, borrower agrees to comply with the terms of the purchase agreement attached hereto as Exhibit D. Mortgage agreement, to secure the repayment of the loan, borrower hereby grants the lender a mortgage on the property, which mortgage shall be in the form of attachment hereto in Exhibit C. Payments, borrower shall make payments on the loan in accordance with the payment schedule set forth in a loan agreement. Default, if the borrower fails to make any payment when due or otherwise default under the terms of this agreement, lender shall have the right to exercise any remedy available under the law or equity. Governing law, this agreement shall be governed by and construed in accordance with the laws of the whatever particular state. And then it says the entire agreement, this agreement altogether, I can't see the rest, Maymoon. But a lot of us, when we look at these contracts and we're signing these mortgage agreements, we're calling it a mortgage, right? We just pledged and did all of these things. And now, once we sign these contracts, we want to opt out of them. And we don't even understand the law associated with these contracts because we're not reading them. Most of us go, when we go buy a home, we don't take 2 or 3 days and ask, could we have this reviewed by an attorney before you sign it? Most of us don't give them notice that this is going to be a consumer transaction. That do they have a license to perform such transaction? Do they have, like most of us don't know that they have to have a security clearance to even utilize the Social Security number. We'll just give anybody the Social Security number and they don't have by federal requisite a Social Security clearance. And that they have to be licensed to do consumer transactions. So we're saying that this is a consumer transaction, but we don't even know the necessary steps to ensure that this is a consumer transaction. So by us not securing our rights, we lose our rights. Because if you don't know your rights, you don't got no rights. So you hear about a lot of people saying, what about the UCC 1-308? You just solidify that you are doing a business transaction and not a consumer credit transaction. You're not using the UCCCs to ensure that the integrity to even know what to ask them in relationship to a consumer transaction to say, I use my consumer credit to perform this transaction. Okay, next slide, Maymoon.
King, before you move on, you did mention the Uniform Commercial Code.
Right.
So I want you to go more into and to explaining the distinction between the Uniform Commercial Code and the Uniform
Consumer Credit Code.
the Uniform Commercial Consumer Credit Code.
Okay, the difference between the Uniform Commercial Codes is that is for commercial business entities. So understanding the law, you must understand the law, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. As a business, you must obtain an attorney. You cannot have an attorney represent you in a court of law. If you have a LLC or any other business, even a sole proprietorship, you must have an attorney. And if you come under such status where you don't have an attorney, then you must understand, right, that as a business entity, you are bound to the agreement. But as a consumer, you are deemed to be a layman and not know the legality. And you can rescind a contract due to the fact that it's unconscionable, that they didn't explain it or allow you to be, your contract to be reviewed by an attorney, and then automatically you could disqualify the contract because they denied you of your due process rights. But if you got a business, they're presuming that an attorney has explained to you your rights associated with that, and that the attorney is going to either represent you or identify what you need to do. And if you have any type of like LLC or any business, most of the time the court will not even allow you to represent a LLC. They're going to tell you need an attorney. You can't come in here without an attorney. So you got to understand these contracts. And if you're coming under any other capacity as an individual, as it relates to a juristic person, you are deemed to be involved, and you have a right to an attorney. That's why they always tell you, you have the right to remain silent, and you have a right to an attorney. So before you enter into any contracts, they let you know, they're supposed to let you know you have a right for an attorney to review the contract. And if they don't, that can be that can be a disqualifiable action. But you got to do that within a reasonable time. Can't come back 5, 6, 10 years later talking about, oh, I didn't have an attorney. They're gonna say you barred. Statutes of limitation. We have to be able to understand these contracts, break these contracts down. That's why you got to have government structure, because the government is going to stop you from making these ill transactions where it's going to hold you, because the government is going to give them notice, provide communication, say, hey, don't communicate with him, communicate with us. Communicate with us. Why? Because he's under our protection. We have to protect him and his rights. You are acting as a government, so it's a government relationship, and now we're enforcing our contract, which is a treaty, and we need you to abide by your obligations and duties according to this contract that we already in. So
Now,
don't
King,
deal with him. Yeah, go ahead.
and I thank you for that, because we need to hear more of that. Once again, these thousands of conscious Moors who have come into this movement a period of 30, 40 years have not heard that. They've heard individual. And I want to thank you for that, because that's, and this is why we're pushing the Shem Malachi Bey's plan, because conscious Moors do not hear that. They don't see government. They don't see the channels of diplomacy. We can change this thing. We're going to change this thing. We're going to elevate the consciousness. to where it should have been over 100 years ago. Thank you again, bro.
I have a question as well, or for people that may watch this video, you know, via YouTube or whatever in the future. I have a question that they may have the same question about. So with, like you said, certain contracts will let you know, hey, you got 14 days for this, or you got 30 days for this. So what happens when you are put into a contract and let's say you're brought into that jurisdiction and, you know, you have a, and they, you know, within the contract far as, and they say you having well, they don't tell you that you have a reasonable amount of time, or like you said, bar, or the things that you stated. So what if they don't tell you how much time do you have? What would be a reasonable time? Where would you go to ask these questions? Are you just supposed to know how much time you have to respond to certain contracts? Is there a policy that lets you know, hey, this is how much time you have to respond to this contract? So what would you have to say about those things?
Okay, so you got to, when you enter the jurisdiction, there's always some guidelines. You must know, right? So a lot of these state laws follow federal law. They work in conjunction. So you need to, when you look at these contracts, you got to remember, all of this stuff falls under a different category of law. So you're going to have mortgage agreements under one category. You're going to have traffic laws under one category, and you must go to that category of law and study that category, because every law is put into a particular category, a classification. So you have to know the law associated with that, the federal and the state law, to see if the state law is in confliction with the federal law and the constitutionality of it. And if there's a confliction and it don't meet constitutional muster, then you got to raise the issue and say, hey, the state law is in confliction with the federal law as required to be aligned. So this violates due process. This is a violation. Most of us don't know that. So when we get into these contracts, due process, one of the things that we must understand, I send you the term of the same kind, right? This is very important term, because I sent you that term. Do you remember the name of that term?
State that again. Were you talking to me?
Yeah, Maymoon. You remember I sent you of the same kind? Let me see if I can. Hold on 1 second. Let me see if I can pull it up. Let me see if I can. I don't want to do it by accident. I put it in your, well, we'll come to that. We'll come to that. 15 USC deal with consumer, right? So when we look at these things, we must understand the law and the conjunction of law. And we must understand, because they're going to say ignorance of the law is no excuse, because they publicly produce all of these laws. They put it out there for you to know. So you must know these things. This is why I talk about substantive due process and procedural due process. I know it back and forward. Why? Why? Because that's what I argue when I go to court. I always argue substantive and procedural due process. I don't even get into any other of the merits. I don't even get into that until we position that. You have to understand these things, because the rights are created by contracts, and these provisions, these statutes are provisions. They're provisions and clauses of contracts. That's all they are. Provisions. When you talk about these United States codes and all of these statutes, they're nothing but provisions and clauses of contracts. That's all they are. Everything is a contract. And we're signing contracts that's adhesion. So we must know. Why do we must know what due process is? The first requirement of due process is notice. They got to give you notice. So if you come in there and you telling them you looking for a consumer transaction, if you don't specify, if you don't know the law, then sit back and stop doing business until you figure out these things. And link up with a Moorish group that know better, know more than you. Because what's gonna happen is you're gonna, as they divide us, right, individual, right? They just divide and conquer. This is how they whooping us, is with contracts. So a lot of us need to understand the questioning, and if you don't know the time frame in which to bring a claim, they got them in they got them in statutes, they got them in the civil rules and procedure, they got them in all of these codes, and you're not following none of them because you're not reading none of it. And we're listening to Moors who haven't litigated, who don't have a substantive or a very long history in litigation, who has an extensive background in litigation, who can point out these ailments when we're dealing with these issues. Hey man, this is a defect. You don't even know what you did. This is why government is so important, because you're acting as an individual. We ain't reading the Constitution. Under the Constitution, it tells you citizens of different states, citizens, subjects, they cannot bring certain claims. It's a prohibition. If we understood the Constitution, then you will understand certain things is already. There are prohibition against certain actions. You wouldn't be asking certain questions if you were very astute. And if you called yourself a constitutionalist. I studied the Constitution. Why? I needed to understand what this meant, what this instrumentality says. So we have to look at, when you're talking about this law, and then every state does it different in certain procedures. Some states give more time, certain states give less time. You have to know the law. And what I try to tell people is, you must understand the Constitution and you must understand these statutes. If not, stand back. Let body politic understand. So you got societies within societies. If you look at the Amish, they do everything. They don't do what we do. You look at some of the mega rich, they ain't running around here with no driver's license. Most of them don't even drive. Why? They have chauffeurs. Hey man, I got a driver. He's liable for the driver's license. I don't got one. They got other forms of ID. Most of y'all don't even know. They tell you if you have a passport, you owe an allegiance to the United States. Most of y'all don't understand, if you in the United States, and it doesn't even matter if you're a citizen or an immigrant or an alien, you are still required to be under the selective services. It don't matter. They don't care who you is. If you in the United States, they're gonna tell you obligated to be under the selective services. These are adhesion contracts that a lot of us are not understanding. You are required. They don't care. So you can call yourself your status or whatever. If you are in the United States, they are going to consider you to have to file for the selective service, and as an adhesion contract. And if you don't, they're gonna say you're in violation. especially if you hold them instruments, a social security card, birth certificate, all of these instrumentalities. You holding these instruments, and then you going in there talking about I'm gonna challenge the jurisdiction. They looking at you like you 14 karat crazy. They beating us with contracts. Okay.
Let me address something, King, with the misconceptions and the, you have Moors who they claim to be Moors, and they'll say that the court doesn't have jurisdiction because I'm a Moor. Yet they're using the United States Constitution for their protection as if they're United States citizen. And you have situations where Moors, they claim to be Moors, and then they'll make comments that they're protected under the Moorish flag and under the Moorish government. So that would imply that we've recovered our lost sovereignty. So it's a lot of misconceptions. That we have to work to clear up. I'll yield on that.
Next slide, May Moon. And what I want to tell you too, if you got a driver's license, you got a passport, you got a birth certificate and a social security card, you cannot change the condition of the contract. You can't turn around and say, well, I'm gonna override your contract. It's already set in stone. They tell you what to do if you want to opt out of these certain things. It's not necessarily, you can come in and out the jurisdiction. A lot of people we're just not reading. If you read POMS, P-O-M-S, that's the Social Security Manual. They tell you you can come in and out the jurisdiction. They tell you all of these different things. They tell you through international law. They tell you through all of these different things that you can come in and out the jurisdiction. They telling you there are certain instruments that you can use to come in and out the jurisdiction. But you hold a birth certificate, social security card, driver's license, passports, all of these instruments, and then you going in there talking about, I'm not part and parcel to the United States. Then you argue the Constitution. I'm enforcing the Constitution as a Moor. You went all the way out of order. They just beating you up with contracts because we don't understand the fundamentals of contracts. Uniform Consumer Credit. The Uniform Consumer Credit Code is a code of conduct that governs consumer credit transactions. It provides guidelines for laws related to the purchase and use of all types of credit products, from mortgages to credit cards. It is intended to protect consumers who use credit from fraud and misinformation. Key takeaways. The code provides guidelines for credit, including limitations on interest rates, protections from usury, and establishment of fair contracts. 9 states have adopted the code, while other states have incorporated its provisions. So there's 9 states. What is the states? I think it's Indiana, Wyoming, or Iowa. I can't think of the other ones. It's like 5 other states that take these consumer credits. And you got to understand, right? So you got the UCCs that started in 1968 and was revised in 1974. You got to understand these consumers, when I told the Moors, hey, I started doing videos on the UCCCs, then no, Moors is like, I ain't never heard of that. What are you talking about? What are you talking about, King? Next slide, May Moon.
I also want to add in the states that you were stating for the people that wants to know the states. So those states are Colorado, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Maine, Oklahoma, Utah, and Wyoming.
Those are the 9 states that has adopted the full consumer credit codes, consumer credit codes.
Peace. May I say one thing?
Yeah.
The reason I like this is I just got on, been on the whole time, but what I'm getting just off of me just listening in since I've been on is this is good because this is knowing thy enemy. And so in war, you want to know yourself and your enemy, how they construct to keep you, you know, in a mental shelter. What are the codes they use? What are the legislation that they use, you know, in order to keep us in a container? So I just want to appreciate, brother. I think this is good to be able to look at what is war, because we associate war with, oh, I got a gun, you know, I shot him, I got a bow and arrow. But war is also in these codes and languages and how it's used to keep us hindered through, you know, mental progression and physical progression. And I just want to add, knowing this is very great as we still want to continue to form our own state. So in the end, we want to be able to, we don't want to be able to have to go to these codes for us to be able to do something. We want to formalize our own structure, you know, and be able to execute documents and travel through our own constitution, you know, through our own, you know, codes of etiquette, so to speak. You know, so I just wanted to offer that to those listening.
Anybody got to say anything else before I go on to this next slide? Any comments or any other questions?
So I'm in Massachusetts, and would that mean that the UCCC code doesn't apply to my state?
No, that's no.
Well,
ahead,
what
Ken.
happens is some states, they only adopt particular provisions. They might not adopt the whole thing. They might only adopt certain provisions. So you got to look at what provisions that your state has adopted in correlation to the UCCCs. Okay.
Okay, I just want to have a clarification because I'm still new, and you know they might have a lot of advanced people on here, but so there's the UCC, and then there's the you know, in addition to that, there's the UCCC, and that one's dealing with the consumer credit. So I have a book here at in my library, right? I believe it's the UCC. So would that mean that I would have to get an additional book that is the UCCC?
Yes. There are a whole set of laws. There are other laws associated.
Yeah, so I think that's what can be confused. I mean, for me, I'm going to speak for myself, like it's confusing because a lot of this information is so scattered. And so when people are trying to navigate this, it's almost like you're navigating a sea of, like, you know, number one, you're navigating a foreign language. Number two, you're navigating different codes and statutes and ordinance, and then you're doing it by state. Ooh, sorry about that. You're doing it by state, you're doing it by federal, like, so it really is a lot of information. And I think for people who's been in the game for, you know, 25, 30 years, I think, you know, this is the first time I'm hearing that there was 2 different UCCs. I thought there was just one UCC book that, you know, hopefully one day I would get to, but now I'm hearing this actually 2. So
It's
yeah,
it's more than you listen. I think, didn't I do something on that on the what is that, the Uniform Law Committee, who write all the uniform codes? There are multitude of uniform codes. There's multitudes of uniform codes that nobody is even mentioning. And it all convert into
let me-
statutory law. Oh, I see, Chief. Okay, Chief, you got a question? Go ahead, Chief Vanderlei, ask the question.
Peace to everybody in the chat.
That's my
Um,
point.
I was just wanting to expound on that. You know, the sister was saying it's two different things that can be confusing. But we talking about two different things. I mean, we're talking about consumer versus commercial. So you got to understand that the UCCCs is dealing with consumer status versus dealing with UCC, which is dealing with commercial. So that's all I was trying to clarify.
Correct.
Right, that's my brother. That's my brother at arms. We forming this league. We're working. So Chief know a lot about the stuff because we bounce this stuff off each other all the time. So we challenge each other. He challenged me. He the one who pushed me to become the kind of litigator I am today. It was by this relationship me and Chief Vanderlei have built a strong relationship over the decade. Over a decade, we've been doing this. Me and him. We've been litigating heavy. So when we tell you that we know how to do certain things, we understand it because we lived through it. We experienced it. So let's Maymoon, could you pull up the other slide?
Hold on. Let me see. I just want to make a comment real quick. I just seen a comment come through that says this whole class sounds like individualism. This is the very thing that we're getting away from and trying to free Conscious Moore's mind of is the individualism. Because hold on. Go ahead for a minute.
What brothers got to understand, the individual concept is a lack of understanding. The individual concept is I can do it all by myself type of thing. One man is an island. And what we know is that when you come against this, right, what happens is that it's a divide and conquer tactic. That's why they come up with the individual status. Hey, you're an individual. You're an individual. That's a status in which they divide and conquer because most of y'all, and I'm being honest, we don't read our contracts. We don't understand all the jurisdictional implications that we're involved in. And then we scream when we get molested by the court system. Oh, they did Mama Moore and this, and they don't even understand the contracts that they signed. So when you have government structure, the government say, no. We can't do that. No. The government is there to protect your rights, to keep you from making those serious violations against yourself. It keep you from harming yourself. The government is there to protect you. It's a trust protector. Hey, we were entrusted to protect our community and they're off limits. You can't deal with them associated with certain contracts. Here's the judicial notice. I want the court to take judicial notice that anytime you do anything or anybody, you must give them a right to seek counsel. You must give them these things so that they don't injure themselves by making these harmful decisions because they don't understand the law.
Thank you, Ken.
Oh, okay, the brothers. All right, so yeah, his presentation will be coming back up shortly. It went out, and then he's logging back in now. But what I was saying was, I see the comment in the chat that says this whole class sounds like individualism. And what I was saying was that is our entire, that's the entire mindset that we're trying to get away from, because this movement has been introduced to individualism, whereas though, you have Moors, conscious Moors teaching, hey, take these 7 documents to 7 agencies of the United States. Hey, put them on notice that you are Moor. What principle, what procedure have you ever seen that? Do the Chinese go to the Chinese government to put them on notice, or do the Chinese go to the European government to let them know that they're Chinese? No, they don't. That's individualism. This is what Moors have been taught. So Moors have been taught that you are the government. No, we are not the government individually. We are a portion of what makes the government, what assembles the government. The whole thing that we are getting away from is the individualism. This is what Brother King is talking about. We must understand the fundamentals, the foundational fundamentals. We have to get the correct concept of sovereignty. We say sovereign, but we don't know what it is. Well, I know what it is. Abdullah know what it is. But when conscious Moors, the majority of conscious Moors say sovereignty, you don't even know the fundamental principles. Brother King, you can go ahead. I just wanted to just relate it. Okay.
While Maymoon get back to the slide. People don't even know there's different aspects of sovereignty. There's different aspects of sovereignty. You got political sovereignty. You got personal sovereignty. You got quasi-sovereignty. There's many different aspects of sovereignty in the international community that we don't even understand. We talk about one principle of sovereignty. And I can show you a slew of different concepts of sovereignty. A slew. We're stuck in a rut because we're stuck in this individual concept. When you have a government, you have a think tank. And that think tank thinks about the whole entire group, and it preserves your rights when you don't know that they're preserving your rights. Let me explain to you how. United States, right? You don't have to worry about what's going on. You sleep good at night. Why? Because the government makes sure of that. You don't have to worry about nobody coming in your home and snatching you out the bed and making you line up and go to this camp and do all of this stuff. Now the government makes sure you don't have to worry about your gas and electric. Why? Because the government makes sure. You don't worry about your water because the government makes sure. You don't worry about the internet. The government makes sure. The government protects your rights. Without government, you trying to do this by yourself. You ain't nothing but a slaughter. You ain't nothing but a sheep about to get slaughtered. You don't understand what the importance of government. You can't do this by yourself. You can try. I see a lot of boys trying by themselves. They might get so far, but then they're gonna run into a brick wall. Government is the only solution. You got to have government because the government is going to allow you to thrive. Without that thrivability of government, You're not going to be able to overcome other nations and their policies. You're going to be a subject all of your entire life without a Moorish government. That is the very importance that we're trying to bring into fruition. Putting together a government so that we can work in unison and that our people don't have to worry about all of these other things. That the government say, okay, you go ahead and do your thing. Be a doctor, be a musician, be a whatever you intended, that the universe intended you to be, your God-given talents. These are your rights. We're going to take care of the government part. You do your part in society. We're going to make sure no other government come and strip you from your land rights, your mineral rights, your children. We're going to make sure that through having government-to-government relations, signing contracts, treaties, combats, alliances. So when you don't understand this stuff on the international community, they're going to look at you and say, look at this guy. He think he government. Look at it. He's a one-man army. He's the general, the president. He's everything all at once. They're going to look at you and say, look at this. They even understand that they have international organizations. Man, y'all got to get this concept through your head. We don't practice individualism. I'm teaching the fundamentals of due process, substantive and procedural. 90%, 99% of the Moors don't understand substantive due process combined with procedural due process. When I get to talking to people, I can tell automatically they don't even understand what's going on. Most of us don't read these contracts at all. I be looking at how they taking my house, Keng El Bey. I'm like, I get to going through the contract. You read your contract? Did you read it? Well, I signed it at closing. You signed it at closing. Did you read it? I read the part where it said to sign. You ain't read the other part? Oh, you didn't know about selective service. Oh, you didn't know that you was in the militia. Oh, you didn't know that you had an obligation to the United States when you got that Social Security number, because they obligated to pay these foreign nations. They obligated to those nations to make sure their debts are satisfied with these nations. You signed up for that. You signed your children up for that. Now you're sitting up here complaining about what's going subjugated. But then we talking about individualism. No, we can't rock on that because most of us don't know enough of the law to even try to do it as an individual. It's too vast, too long. There's over 10,000 volumes in the tax codes. 10,000. We got to stop. So let's get into Public Law 97-280, October 4th, 1982. Public Law 97-280, Joint Resolution. It says authorizing, I can't read that, requesting the president. Yeah, could you read it for me, Maymoon? It's too little.
Yeah, I got you. Public Law 97-280, 97th Congress Joint Resolution, authorizing and requesting the president to proclaim 1983 as the year of the Bible. Whereas the Bible, the Word of God, has made a unique contribution in shaping the United States as a distinctive and blessed nation and people. Whereas deeply held religious convictions springing from the Holy Scriptures led to the early settlement of our nation. Whereas biblical teachings inspired concepts of civil government that are contained in our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. Whereas many of our great national leaders, among the presidents, Washington, Jackson, Lincoln, and Wilson, paid tribute to the surpassing influence of the Bible in our country's development, as in the words of President Jackson, that the Bible is the rock on which our republic rests. Whereas the history of our nation clearly illustrates the value of voluntarily applying the teachings of the scriptures in the lives of individuals, families, and societies. Whereas this nation now faces great challenges that will test this nation as it has never been tested before. And whereas the renewing of our knowledge of and faith in God through holy scriptures can strengthen us as a nation and people, now thereof be it. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that the president is authorized and requested to designate 1983 as a National Year of the Bible, in recognition of both the formative influence the Bible has been for our nation and our national need to study and apply the teachings of the Holy Scriptures. Approved October 4th, 1982.
So this is public law. This is not private law. This is placed upon government. They recognize the Bible. They recognize the Quran. They recognize your religious rights. This is going to let you know, when you look at these things, you got to understand how this jurisdictional work. I just put that in as an extra bonus to understanding certain fundamental principles in which this country is founded on, so you can understand the jurisdictional issues when you go in there and you know how to deal with this court. I litigated too long. I'm well versed in understanding how to deal with these issues, due process. So let's get back to understanding the UCCs. It is not a state or federal law. Understand the UCCs. It's not a state or federal law. It's a condition of contract law. Although it is not used nationally, the code has been adopted by 9 states: Indiana, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Maine, Oklahoma, Utah, and Wyoming, with other states incorporating at least some of its provisions into their law. South Carolina and Wisconsin have codes that are very similar to the UCCCs. This is not state or federal law. This is dealing with the states can't interfere with the obligations of the contract. So when the state adopted it into its law, now it's mandated amongst the entities that's in the states. So you got to understand, on another class, I get into that extraterritorial jurisdiction and setting up an entity that now can then have extraterritorial jurisdiction in other states using these UCCCs. So you will have to understand certain stuff as it relates to consumer credit transactions. It requires licensing and notices. Go on to the next slide, Maymoon.
I believe that's all the slides we had. Let's see if it's another slide on here.
Okay, that might be the last one.
Yeah, that is the last slide. The rest was questions and things of that sort.
Okay. So you got to understand the UCCCs, right? I thought there was one about the contract, licensing and stuff like that. What happened to that form, the DFI, the Indiana UCC with the DFI, Maymoon? You know what I'm talking about, Maymoon? Let me see if I can.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I said I could upload that and put that on the screen. Do you need the Indiana one?
Yeah, put that up, because I thought we incorporate that into the slide. Okay. Let me close this out.
Any questions, anyone? Any questions, comments? Questions or comments on what Any do we know the distinction between, all right, we have the uniform commercial code is commercial, and the uniform consumer credit codes for consumer.
One is intended for businesses, right? For a business structure, and then the other one is for consumers. Consumers are not looked at as the same as a business. You think you can pull it up, Maymoon, in your email? I think I sent it to you by email.
Yeah, I could pull it up. I just had to take myself off sharing so I can be able to go to my email and pull it up, and then I'll share the screen again.
Okay, thank you, brother.
Any questions, anyone?
Y'all got to have,
I highly suggest, yes, any questions?
they got to have some questions. Everybody is,
I mean, yeah, I mean, this is a lot. This is great though. You know, great PowerPoint. The main did a great job in structuring the PowerPoint.
Giving an example as a organization, a society, a community, how we can operate outside of these instruments as those entities.
okay, so you can create a society, right? Outside of the United States, and it's all done through contract, right? Those societies can adopt treaties into their origin or their state under original jurisdiction. So you have to understand how to do this through contract. So Shim talked about it through a social trust. So through a community trust. So you can call it whatever you want. You can call it society trust, a community trust, a social trust, an international trust agreement for whatever the Moors, whatever you call yourself. And you have to understand how to go about contracting with each other. Once you get that done, then you have to understand how to get those documents authenticated, through getting them notarized and getting authenticated through the state, county, and federal governments, and understanding how to utilize these instruments and present these instruments, these contracts into the jurisdiction. But you can't be holding these United States instruments and then declaring one thing. If you don't have those instruments, they already got provisions for you to come in, and you have to understand all the different provisional avenues through the application of law, how to come in and out the jurisdiction, but identify as a person of a particular society that's under a particular treaty agreement.
That's a good breakdown, bro. Appreciate that.
And you would, King, Brother King, you're gonna have to put that in the chat. That link that you sent to me takes me to a whole different website. I'm not able to pull up the actual link, the Indiana.
Let me see.
But I did have a question for you that you touched on a little bit that I would like to know more about myself. It's a few things you said. You said the quasi-RAM jurisdiction and the RAM jurisdiction. Could you touch on that a little more and explain?
Okay. When we talk about quasi-REM, we're talking about things. We're talking about, when you talk about in REM jurisdiction, right? We're talking about a thing, right? When we talk about quasi in REM, we're talking about how a thing touches a jurisdiction, creating a minimum contact. So United States, when we deal with these things, right, we have to look at how these things, right, are in conjunction with the jurisdiction. Let me see if that, because I think at one point, yeah, I think they changed it. Let me see if I got that same. Here it go. Nah, this ain't it. Let me see if this is. Nah, this ain't it. Oh man. For some reason, it changed about that contract. Man, let me see if I can pull it up, maybe for a second. I'm trying to find.
While you're trying to find that, I just wanted to direct everyone to the chat. Yannick posted something, so you might want to take a look at it. Article, what is that, 4.5, Uniform Consumer Credit Code?
Yeah, it's the PDF. It's the PDF, Brother Terrence.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure everybody knows about that.
You know what's so crazy? May Moon, you remember that link? It turned into another link.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't able to pull it up. When I clicked on it, it turned to something else. So I was going
It
to see.
turned into another link. That's what I'm saying. The link that I sent you, for some reason, it turned into another link. I never seen that happen before. I'm looking at it like, I sent him this link, and then the link then turned into another link. I'm trying to look at that form. Let me see. Let me see if I can pull it up.
All right, so we have, once again, like, comment, and subscribe. This Moroccan Post Media YouTube page will, video class will be uploaded. So like, comment, and subscribe. Also share. We have our classes on the Moroccan Post Media YouTube page. We have the Moroccan Post Memorials Treaty Protection and Consular Relations 101 course, and we have 4 classes of the 201 course. And this class will be uploaded tomorrow.
Or tonight,
You ready?
depending on
Or tonight.
Okay.
Yes. All right.
Here's the form. So under the commercial form, Department of Financial Institution, this is the form for your UCCCs. And it tells to applicants for a loan license. This application is for a license to engage in consumer loan transaction under any and a uniform consumer credit code. It's the IUCCC. IC Indiana Code 24-4.5. The IUCCC provides unless a person is exempt from the IUCCC under IC 24-4.5-1202 1-202 or exempt from licensure under IC 24-4.5-3502 or has the first obtained a consumer loan license from the Department of Financial Institution. An individual or entity may not engage in the business of making such loans. You got to have a lot of y'all going in here and y'all not even asking, hey, you as a bank or an institution, can you do consumer loan transactions? They got to tell you if they can or not. So you go buy a home and you don't put them on notice or even ask them, do they have a license to even perform these kind of transactions? If they've been exempt from having to have a license, and if they can even perform such transactions. So when you get into court, guess what? The court presumed that you did it as a business and not as a consumer. Because you don't have a record showing that you applied and informed them that you want this to be a consumer transaction. Utilizing your consumer credit. Everybody teaching you, hey, you got to do the UCC 1-308, and they ain't even telling you about the consumer credit codes. I ain't heard one more even talk about the Consumer Credit Code. Not one. It says if an individual or entity is taking assignment of consumer loans or undertaking direct collection of consumer loan payment in Indiana, a loan license is also required. The original application is filed with the DFI. A copy should be retained by the applicant. Only one license is needed per legal entity to operate one or more locations. To make a small loan, so you go and apply for credit cards, all of these different things, and you're not asking these people, is they licensed to do consumer credit transactions? Or is they exempt and that you want to apply for a consumer credit transaction? You want to use your consumer credit that a lot of people are telling you, but you remember, you part and parcel of the United States. Once you do this, you don't get to say I'm a Moor and I'm outside of the jurisdiction. You don't get to serve two masters. That ain't how it works. So if you plan on using these loans, make sure you abide yourself as a U.S. citizen. Make sure you understand that. You better shake your head and understand that when you utilizing these consumer credit, that you are a U.S. citizen. To take first lien or subordinate lien mortgage loans, an applicant must apply for appropriate mortgage lending license. They telling you right here, an applicant must apply for appropriate mortgage lending license via the nationwide mortgage licensing system and registry, the NMLSR. See the DFI website for additional details. Licensing fee, an initial loan license fee of $1,000 must be submitted with the application. The check or money order is located and made payable to the Department of the Financial Institution. Licenses are renewed annually with the IUCCC creditors notification return due by December 31st. The required license renewal fee is greater of $1,000 or the annual volume fees paid under Indiana Code 24-4.5-6203. Please also see the refund policy on the DFI website. Experience. Applicants must show a minimum of 2 years of financial related experience for anyone will manage an Indiana location. Got to have 2 years experience. Financial requirements: review or audit financial statements prepared by an independent CPA or the most recent 10K filing, the Security and Exchange Commission, indicating a minimum net worth of $100,000 in liquid assets of at least $50,000 must accompany the application. Liquid assets include cash or its equivalent, assets that are readily convertible to cash without significant loss, such as treasury bills, short-term marketable securities, demand deposit, and time deposits nearly maturity. For other assets to be considered liquid, the CPA must clarify by a footnote as how to the liquidity was determined. If the applicant for the license is limited liability company or subchapter S corporation, then in addition to a CPA review or audit level financial statement on the corporate entity, personal financial statement must be submitted for an individual who owns at least 10% of the LLC or subchapter S corporation. Personal financial statements do not have to be prepared by a CPA but must meet acceptable minimum US GAAP accounting standards. This is what I'm trying to tell y'all, my family. Moors don't even know how to operate within the United States, let alone by treaty. This is why government structure is needed. Credit reports. Credit reports for business entity, executive officers, owners, and Indiana corporation management should be attached to the application. Criminal background checks. A nationwide criminal background check based on fingerprint must be completed for each owner of a sole proprietor. So as an individual, if you're talking about doing consumer credit transactions, remember, an individual by the Internal Revenue Code is a sole proprietor. You must apply and get your licensing to be able to even do consumer transactions. Or by default, you're gonna be consumed to by default, you're going to be presumed to be utilizing the UCCs. Partnerships, member LLCs, officers, as well as members for Indiana location. The DFI use Morpho Trust USA to take and or process fingerprint cards for background checks. Procedures will differ depending on whether you are located in Indiana or in other parts of the country. Look at this. If you are in Indiana or other parts of the country, please visit our website. Here's the website right here. For more information on background checks, a copy of the FBI privacy policy and the fingerprinting institution. Do not send fingerprint card to the DFI, as this will only delay your license application. Each application must include with its jurisdiction specific documents, at least of all personnel to be fingerprinted for background checks. Reference, provide 3 references, including names and address, willing to acknowledge the financial responsibility, character, and fitness of the applicant. 1 reference must be representative of a financial institution. A letter of reference must be submitted on business letterhead with the licensing application. Forms must be submitted. When submitting the application, you are to enclose complete sample transaction documents, which will be used in conjunction with your lending transaction, including loan applications, note and security agreements, disclosure forms, if not part of item 2 or 3, retail installment contracts, if applicable. Please note, the application and financial statement must be fully complete and filed with the DFI along with required initial license fee. Upon approval of the license application, the applicant will be notified and provided a license ID. The licensee should show the assigned license number in all correspondence with the DFL subsequent to licensing. Licensing under the IUCCCs are issued on the basis of representations made in the application. Any substantial change in information included in the application must be reported to the DFI within 30 days after the change. See IC 24.535.056 and 7. Change in the legal name and assumed business name requires notification to the DFI. Do y'all see this? Change in your legal name. So if you try to do consumer transactions, you got to have a license. You got to have all of these things, and you got to meet these things. So all these people telling you how to go about suing for consumer stuff, look at this right here. I did not make this up. I did not make this up. Assume business name required notification to the DFI. Indiana loan license are not assignable or transferable. CIC 24.5350311 and IC 24.4 dash 3-515. Any changes in control of the license must be requested and received prior to approval by the DFI under IC 244-5-3-515 Consumer Credit Division. Here's the information. So you don't even have to be in the state. If you register the juristic person in the state of Indiana or one of them states, you have to get a licensing if you want to do consumer credit. Then you can go out there and do all types of consumer credit transactions. Now you can solidify, hey, I can do these consumer credit and I can use my social security and all of that. But ain't nobody teaching us these things. We turn it around and we listening to other people. So a lot of us, right, we wasn't trained as US citizens. I was even thinking about suing the United States for failure to train, for their inability to train us because we're not trained in this information. So it created what? Economic hardship. It caused all type of injuries because they never trained you in an area so you can thrive. They never trained you. They never gave you due process of law. It's a requirement. They put you in the dark and expect you to learn this information. And it costs thousands of dollars to know these things and go to school for these things. And most of us don't have the money to meet these qualifications and know all of this stuff. This is why government is so important. Because government can say, no. You got your hand in the cookie jar. No. You can't do that to us. He's under our protection. No, he didn't know what he was doing. So we gonna, come on, he couldn't even contract with you. He couldn't even contract with you. He couldn't even contract with you. So what? He signed this. He couldn't contract with you because the government already said he couldn't contract with you. So it don't matter what you signed with him. You already knew the consequences when you got in bed with him because he told you he was a Moor. We are here to protect your rights. You know the treaty that you signed. No. But everybody want to teach you this individual. If you come under government, the government would already have it, already securitize your rights. Stop the encroachment of your rights, violation of treaty, breach of treaty agreements. So even if you get into a bad contract, guess what? The treaty will supersede their agreement, and your contract with your agreement with your Moorish community would then come in, protect your rights and say, no, this was an invalid contract. It's a breach. You know you couldn't sign a contract with him in his individual status. He has to go through the government. Okay, he made a mistake. We ain't ready there, man. It's too many misconceptions, too many people teaching the wrong thing, too many people telling you you're a secure party creditor. There's too many people teaching these individual concepts and they don't know what they're doing. That's why when you call them back, hey man, I paid Keng El Bey, I paid this brother $2,500. Could you give me some information on what I could do? You need to go back to that dude you paid that $2,500 to. I ain't got no, I paid $5,000, Keng El Bey. I don't know what to tell you. Did you sign a contract with him? What did you do? He sold you this process. You need to go back because I don't know what his process is. I don't know I don't know what's in this packet. You got to go back to the source you got it from. I can't tell you or make you right, make you whole when you did business with him and try to solidify what he's and sold you. No, I can't do that. You got to go back to the person. So I'm showing you, this is the proof of claim. I'm showing you, I ain't make this stuff up. Here's this document. Oh shoot, I don't know what I just did. I just hit something. I'm trying to move the screen. It won't move for some reason. Okay. I'm showing everybody, I'm not making this stuff up, family. I'm not. This ain't me. This don't say Keng El Bey said nothing. Here's the application. How do I put this in the chat? How do I put this application in the chat? I need to put this form in the chat.
Yep,
Just put the link to the form to the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, copy and paste that. You can paste that into the chat. That
Paste it
address.
into- I just pasted it into the chat. So now you got a copy of this. It tell you what's required. So now you can kill all of that stuff about. I listen to people teaching you, talking about, man, you got it. I listen to all these guys on the internet. And they ripping people off. They can't, ain't none of them showed y'all this. Ain't none of them even talked about the UCCC. You ain't got one more that talked about these UCCC. This
what,
is
brother?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, actually that's installed on your computer. So I thought that was the internet link, the address, but that's not. That's to your
That's
hard
my
drive. Yeah, so you take that PDF or whatever that is, and then you can drag it to the chat.
I can take, hold on, how would I do that?
What did you click on to open that file?
If you want to download, if you click save, and I guess re-download it or download it.
Okay.
And then you can click and drag it.
Okay, it's right here already, so.
Oh yeah, just drag that
into
into
that out first.
So let me go to this, hold on.
You just drag that to the chat.
Okay, hold on, let me go back. Let me see the chat. Did y'all get that?
Yeah, it's here. Thank you.
So this is what I'm saying. It's too much ground to cover. This is why you need government. As an individual, it's too much ground to cover. It's just too much. I don't even know everything. I'm good. I'm telling you, I'm really good at legal, being able to argue in the court as a litigator. I'm really good. But I don't know everything. This is why you have departments in government. This is why government structure is so important, because you have certain departments that specialize in certain areas. And that's what they specialize in. They don't go and try to study what the other part of the government knows. And each government have their own specific jurisdiction and grounds that they cover. So it get referred to that department. Hey man, this is a consumer transaction. Okay, let's go over to this consumer bureau. They specialize in that. Or this is a criminal investigation. Go to the FBI. They specialize in this. This is a central intelligence. This is an intelligent issue. This is a breach. Go to the CIA. This is why you have government structure. So that you don't have a bunch of people trying to know everything. One individual trying to know everything. You can break it up into the compartments where the government has specific areas in which they know. And then you refer it to that department. No, the individualism got to go. You can't do it all. This is why we in the shape we in. Because one person think they can do it all, they don't need you. Oh man, we got this all together. I know what I'm doing in this and in this. When I listen to most average brothers, they can't litigate. They don't know how to litigate. I get calls from all types of brothers. Hey, Keng El Bey, I was with this group, man. I'm in jail. Could you help me out? What happened to your organization? I don't know, man. They ain't answering my phone call no more. What? Why? I don't know, man. I sent my mama, I had my family call over there. They ain't answering my sister call. They ain't answering my mama call. They ain't answering my brother call. Why? Why they stop answering your call, my brother? They told my sister they might need some more money to try to help me. But then they the ones who give you this advice? Yeah, they told me don't do this and I ain't got to do this. And some more, I ain't got to do that. But then they ain't even showing up for your court hearing. What happened? So that individual thing is not happening. We got to form a union. We got to unite so we can combat this thing as a whole and work together. Any questions, anybody? Any questions? Come on, y'all got to have some questions now.
Any questions? Come on, y'all. Any questions? Any questions?
I'm just listening, man. I don't know.
I can't. You're breaking up. You're breaking up.
Somebody got to have
You don't have
a
any
question.
questions? I think I heard no. No, I don't have any questions. I believe I heard that.
No, man, somebody got to have some questions. I know I ain't answer everybody. I answer everybody.
No,
I got one for you. I got one for you, King.
Yeah.
I got one for you.
Okay, come on with it, Yanni.
Now, when you saying using the UCCC, you clarified in your statement that you're becoming a United States citizen, right? Correct?
Yeah. If you using this instrumentality, you cannot turn around and say that I am not a U.S. citizen. You're using their instruments. What instrument do we supposed to be using?
Our own instrument.
What is our own instrument? Come on, y'all. Talk to me. What is our instrument?
Issued from Moorish government.
But what is
Treaty.
we standing? Okay.
Yeah, dang. Okay, cool.
What treaty should we be standing on? What treaties that we should be presenting into the courtroom?
Madrid.
None.
The Madrid. Come on, let's go.
No, not presenting any treaties in the courtroom.
Of what?
We're not supposed to be presenting any treaties in the courtroom.
You're supposed to
Government
present it to
structure. Because government structure.
you can present a treaty. That we talking about, see, you gotta remember there's different courts. State courts can't hear treaty matters. But then you got federal court that can hear treaty matters. They can hear treaty matters.
It depends what the treaty reads, though. I mean, no, the federal courts can hear treaty matters. Then you have to look at what treaty, if it's an extra territory. Let me explain. Federal courts can hear treaty matters. Now you have the issue of extraterritorial consular jurisdiction. You have consular jurisdiction.
Right.
If the treaty has a extraterritorial consular jurisdiction, then that court, the United States court, cannot hear the matter. All right. That in the United States counter memorial, I sent it out to 50 people. I sent 50. This is the United States counter memorial to the French memorial. A memorial in international law initiates a suit. In 1950, I think 448, France initiated a suit against the United States and the International Court of Justice, based on the France claimed to have the most favorable nation status. United States had 6 months to issue a counter memorial. I combed through that 600 pages and took out 15 pages of that counter memorial, which will be in chapter 8 of Moors and Masonry Part 2. I sent it out to 50 people back in September of last year. We was put in the chat, all right? In that 15 pages that is in chapter 7 of Moors and Masonry, I think chapter 7 or chapter 9 of Moors and Masonry Part 2. The 15 pages, there are extraterritorial consular jurisdiction, capitulatory / extraterritorial consular jurisdiction clauses with treaties dating back to 1600s, so 1700 treaties. And in those clauses, extraterritorial consular jurisdictional clauses, it mentions only a consul, only a Dutch consul, only a Swedish consul, only a French consul. All right, so the question is, so when Amanda says what she said about none, because she knows that the Moorish treaties have extraterritorial consular jurisdiction clauses. Now, if it doesn't have an extraterritorial consular jurisdiction clause, all right, so you're looking at when Hausenstein versus Lynham. And Hausenstein versus Lynham, Solomon Hausenstein had purchased 3 properties in Virginia. When he transitioned, his relatives, I think his nephew and niece, bought the suit. What Virginia had done was sold his 3 properties and kept the proceeds. Virginia had enacted a law that violated that treaty between the United States and the Swiss Confederation of 1850 by enacting that law that they could keep the proceeds from the sale. All right, so when his nephew and niece bought the suit to reclaim the proceeds from their uncle's sale, from the sales of his uncle's property, the court had to first be determined that Solomon Hausenstein ever renounced his allegiance and citizenship to Switzerland. Once it had to be determined that Solomon Hausenstein never renounced his allegiance to Switzerland, then that determined that that treaty applied. And Article 6 of that treaty allows Hausenstein's relatives to claim the proceeds for the sale. All right, so that treaty does not have an extraterritorial, a capitulatory or extraterritorial consular jurisdiction clause. So therefore, that's why the United States that federal court could hear that case, but not in all cases. And so I just wanted to clarify, it was called capitulatory jurisdiction back in the 1200s, 13, 14, 1500s, and then it started using extraterritorial consular jurisdiction. Now, there's a difference between extraterritorial consular jurisdiction and consular jurisdiction. Extraterritorial consular jurisdiction, whereby the consul has jurisdiction over criminal and civil matters, and consular jurisdiction on the civil. All right.
So I want y'all to understand what he just said. Now I'm gonna break this down, and we're gonna put this in a little more context, right? Make this transition a little smoother. So when you have these kind of extraterritorial compensatory consular jurisdiction, that is a prohibition against certain nations from being able to exercise jurisdiction, because it's already stare decisis, it's already settled within the jurisdiction who can make the determination, who can determine it, who can interpret it and determine the jurisdictional outcome. So that's when you come in and you put in a what? An estoppel. An estoppel to stop them from moving forward because they don't got the jurisdiction. See, I'm listening to the language because the language is very specific to the contract. You got to know the language, the jurisdiction. It's specific to the contract, right? So when he said, hey, based upon these terms and conditions, this is already settled. The parties started enacting the contract, so only consular is a difference between particular types of consular jurisdictions. And within each consular jurisdiction, right, it specifies how jurisdiction can be operated under the application of law, the operation of law that can, who can decide the case and the fate of the contract. This is why we need to understand contract law, family. I'm listening. I know how to decipher. I don't have to go back and do all of this because I litigated enough to understand how to deal with contracts. Go ahead, family. Pamela.
Yes, thank you. So I have two questions, two different questions. One is for you. For the example that you gave for the state of Indiana, would that go for the same in any state, or each state has their own guidelines according to what your example?
So I remember I said it's only 9 states that adopted the full UCCs. And in this instruction, right, it tells you, where is it at? It tells you if you are in any other state or any other location, right here. Can you see that?
Yes. What are the 9 states? Do you know the 9 states?
May Moon, you still on?
Yeah, I'm still here.
It was put up earlier that
Could you tell the 9 states again?
What was the 9 states were oh man, Colorado, Idaho, Indiana,
Iowa,
Kansas, Oklahoma, and Utah. Oh yeah, and Maine and Wyoming.
So California doesn't apply.
No, but listen,
but other states
read the criminal background checks, right? And it talks about the FDI uses Morpho Trust USA to process a fingerprint card for background checks. The procedure will differ depending on whether you are located in Indiana or other parts of the country. So what you have to understand is how to set this up, and then what you have to do is what you call extraterritorial jurisdiction. You got to understand trust law in relationship to, you can set up an entity in Indiana, and then that entity then comes down to California, but that entity is governed by Indiana law. That's a whole nother discussion. That's a whole nother topic. That's a more sophisticated process, a little more sophisticated.
Thank you. The second part question was for Abdullah when he was speaking about the different kind of consulates. How would one go about establishing this? I know we're a long way from there, but what would it take to establish that since there are two different types? I thought it was only one, but you
All right, let
explained
me
it.
answer that. All right, I'm going to answer that. The Montevideo Convention, the acts to do is the state. So that is not, this is not the origin of the principle. This is a well-settled principles that deals with what constitutes a state, a permanent population, independence, a government. Now we have in political science, political legitimacy, which is the consent of the people, the source, the people are the source of government power. So you have you must facilitate the will of the people, the consent of the people, and through community outreach, through large scale community outreach. The people, we need their consent. You need the consent of the people because they're the source of government. So and this has to be the answer. Whenever you ask this question, this is the same answer that all Moors should give them. Of course, they're not. They're gonna say 5 people could do a state. Of course, they're not. They're in violation. The people are the source of government power. You cannot establish Jack without the people. Consent. That's political legitimacy. That principle is taught in political science. If you talk about establishing something, if you do not mention large outreach and facilitate education of the people, you're already off. You're already off. If someone says, well, yeah, draft the Constitution, you're already off. You're already off. If they're not saying community outreach, because the people, you need the people. That's the authority. That's political. It's called political legitimacy. I'm hearing all this other stuff. 5 people can have a state. 7. Well, who elected y'all? Like, who elected y'all then? Like, hold on. All y'all are officials. Well, who elected y'all? What I'm saying is that it's not going to be honored if we don't show due process, safeguard measures among ourselves. No one in the world is going to respect you, honor you, recognize you. We must show a pattern of due process among ourselves. So and in the Shin Malachi Bey statement to the people, there is a paragraph that addresses the formation and expression, facilitating the formation and expression of the consent, the free will of the people through large-scale community outreach and network. If a jurist were to read the Shin Malachi Bey's statement, it's going to be well respected. What are we projecting? Is to carry on our back the millions of our people, carry the millions of people on our back by raising the level of education and presentation. I got a state, a Moorish national federal government, three Moors over here and 20. It's utterly ridiculous. All right. So you must start with community outreach. I don't know. Without that, because I understand, we must understand the principle that the people are the source of government power. When Maymoon presented last Wednesday night, 2 weeks ago, the PowerPoint, and he had political legitimacy, and he tied the political legitimacy and facilitate that to community outreach and networking, making that connection. When you hear the statement, government and the people. That's a constructive. That when you say that's a violation. To use, let's look at grammar. And it's like government and the people. That's a coordinated conjunction and a coordinated conjunction. So you're saying you bringing, it implies that there's no connection. There's no natural connection. You bring it in a plan when you use government and the people. That construction. It implies that these are two separate entities that are being joined. No. They're not two separate entities. Government is the source. So you're talking vested power, these seats. That's the people. That's the sovereignty of the people vested in that instrument. So there's no such thing as government and the people. The people, when you say government, that's the people. Government is the people, and the people. It's a false concept of use and. I yield.
Thank you.
All right, so to respect time, it is past 10 o'clock. We can continue next week. Do we have any other questions before we wrap up? All right, no other questions? You're on mute, brother, if you're trying to say something.
Okay,
Okay.
before, the brother decolonization had his hand up for a minute. I don't know if he want to ask a question, but this is what I was going to sue the government for, failure to train case law. It says failure to train case law to a lawsuit against an employer or manufacturer who allegedly did not provide adequate training to their employees or customers on how to use their product and services. Such case can be used on obvious need for training and a derivative of a failure to warn claim in the context of public employees such as law enforcement officers. Failure to train cases may be subjected to the defense of qualified immunity, which requires the plaintiff to show that the law was clearly established and violated by the defendant. So I was going to sue at one point, and I was even thinking about suing on the behalf of our population on that. The United States failed to train us. They failed to give us the adequate ability to be able to utilize these instruments and the resources necessary to safeguard our rights and do those failure to train caused us deprivation, harm, and didn't allow us to have due process safeguards in which the government employed mass incarceration strategies on us based upon these factors. This is what I was going to sue the government on. Failure to train. See, when you have litigated enough, you can see the apparatuses that's being used against us. Failure to train. Who's been trained in UCCs? Who's been trained in finance? Who's been trained in banking laws? Who's been trained in these areas of law? Who's been trained? They're gonna say, well, you can go to court. No. Now, it ain't about going to court. It ain't about me becoming a lawyer. Right? You didn't make sure that when I left high school that I understood these things. And this was to my own deprivation. And they know that. They single-handedly miseducated you so that you wouldn't have these things. So at one point, this was what I was going to sue the government on. So I yield. If any questions, please ask, because we're getting ready to close out. It's 10:10.
Why did you decide not to sue the government?
See, this is what we got to understand. Litigation can be a long, lengthy process. You got to have the right kind of people. I didn't, because it took me a long time to just learn this process, just to be a proficient litigator, right? So I've been doing this for over a decade, and I litigated, very extensively, a lot over those 10 years, a lot of litigation. It can be a very stressful process for one individual to perform such heights. So I decided I didn't want to drag my family through that anymore. Now it's time for me and my brother. I've been, promising Chief Mandalay, my brother Karas, that I'm ready to start moving and grooving on another tone. I'm setting up a community. I'm doing all type of different things now. People are ready for me to take action. I didn't want to drag this out. Because even if I win, I try to tell people, a lot of times, even when you win, they still took years of your life. It took me years to win my case. Years. And that was a child custody case. The average person spends on a litigation 40 to 50,000, especially in civil suits. That is a lot, and that could be very detrimental on the family and a lot of stress. My wife and my children have suffered long enough, so that's why I decided not to do that. And I didn't have, even with my brothers, it would take a group of lawyers, a group of Moors to make this application of law work. We will have to comb through every avenue, look at every case law, look up everything. I don't think individuals know the kind of work that's necessary to do these kind of feats. So is there any other questions before we leave this group? Man, y'all been very quiet tonight. I silenced the crowd that much.
You did a great job.
Wow.
Everybody's thinking.
Great job, King.
Yeah, great
Great
job. You
job.
answered a lot of questions
Yeah,
already.
great job.
We're gonna listen to the
yes.
recording, y'all. I advise everyone to listen to watch this class again, share it. It's going to be uploaded between tonight and tomorrow. Share it, post it on your YouTube page, Instagram, TikTok, Hot Talk, whatever talk.
I just wanted to say thank you for your time and the knowledge that you brought here today. I appreciate it. And you do have people that, people like us that are willing to fight this fight with you. I just wanted to say thank you.
You're welcome. It's honors. It's honors to everybody who listened to me. I dedicated my life to this. This is my I think this is just my calling. This was what I was meant to do. So I'm with Sam, I'm with everybody, I'm with Abdullah. I told him we're gonna rock this until the wheels fall off. And anybody, Yannick, to Amanda, to everybody on the recording, to all the young brothers, like I was telling Maymoon, we need the youth because they're going to carry the torch. So thank everybody for listening and joining in to this lecture, and many more to come. I yield.
Yeah, he'll be back. He'll be back the second Wednesday. What date is that, y'all? The second Wednesday of April. He'll be back the second Wednesday in April. Then he already has some commitments. I was trying to get him for 4 consecutive classes. I try to sneak that in, 4 consecutive classes, but he let me know today that he has some scheduled commitments, but he will be able to come back for the second Wednesday of the month. Give me the date, please. The
12th.
second, April 12th. Thank you. 2 days after my solar return. He'll be back 2 days after my solar return. All right. On Wednesday, April 12th. We'll be back here on Wednesday, April 12th. King will be presenting. All right. And Maymoon and I will help him. All right. Prepare for the next presentation. All right. So see y'all next April 12th. Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll have Keng El Bey, all right, presenting. All right, then after that, we'll bring back Shem for the 4th Wednesday, all right, to continue with the Moorish Treaty Protection and Consular Relations series, 201 series. All right, so I think y'all, this will be uploaded. Moroccan Post Media YouTube page. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and also share this. Share it to your Facebook page, to others, to friends and co-workers and so forth. All right. We definitely appreciate your commitment. All right. So we have, once again, the Moroccan Post School of Government and International Law. Thank you for your commitment to uplifting and bringing and reviving and bringing our mother out of the 200-year period of a coma. That is the 200-year of temporary extinction, collapse, disintegration, dismemberment due to European conquest and subjugation. On the Moorish Treaty, you have my books, moorsandmasonry.org, Moors and Masonry Part 1, Illuminati and Illumination of the Mind, the Masonic Compass Square and the Connection and Measurement of Timekeeping, How Her Venus and Moon Rule, Etymology and Vocabulary, Supplement to 1, and coming your way soon, very, very soon, Moors and Masonry Part 2, The Power of Moorish Treaties and the Recovery of Lost Moorish Sovereignty. Go to moorsandmasonry.org. Thank you. Don't forget, once again, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace, everyone.